Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Why don't we all chant together? Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvahutam Parijina Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vikamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Radha Kalachandji ki jai, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Shri Gaurnitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, His Grace Aindra Prabhu ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. So, Nityananda Prabhu asked that we use this time to talk about and glorify His Grace Aindra Prabhu. So I wasn't planning on being the only speaker. So you can, all of you in the room can think about whether you'd like to, whether you had some association with him or some inspiration from him, and would like to say some words in appreciation after I jotted down some notes from that I wanted to speak about. Oops. First, I thought I would read this one thing. I was thinking, here we go, thank you, about Srila Haridas Thakur. And of course, we don't want to jump really quick and compare our present-day ISKCON devotees to, Lord Chaitanya's personal associates, but there certainly is some inspiration, I'm sure, that His Grace Aindra Prabhu derived from the life and teachings of Srila Haridas, and an example of Srila Haridas Thakur. And there are some, connections that we can make. Even we sometimes don't think about this, but on a certain level, in terms of society, Haridas Thakur remained a Mohammedan his whole life. It's not that there was any process by which a Mohammedan could become a Vaishnava in those times, and that's significant in the sense that the fact that I think it's mentioned here. Oh no, it's in the Anjalila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that he was offered the first Pinda, is it? So that wasn't like some small thing. It was a total shock in one sense, because he was a Mohammedan, and he kept for a long time, his beard, as we see in that photo of Gadadhar Pandit reading to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and other Maharaj Patrapudra is there paying obeisances, and there's Srila Haridas Thakur with his Mohammedan beard. So, yet, as we all know, he was Nam Acharya, Srila Haridas Thakur, and was recognized by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and was all over the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and by the congregation of Vaishnavas at that time, as such a great soul that there's in the Anjali there's two chapters just about Srila Haridas Thakur, about his glories and then about his passing away. And so Aindra Prabhu, he wasn't born in a Gaudiya Vaishnava family. He joined in Washington, D.C. in the USA. And yet, by the grace of his spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he attained such a level of attachment to the holy names. Sanatana Goswami, he said, you probably have heard of this many times, it's such a wonderful statement. He glorified Srila Haridas Thakur in this way. O Haridas Thakur, who is equal to you? You are one of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, you are the most fortunate. The mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for which he has descended as an incarnation, is to spread the importance of chanting the holy name of the Lord. Now, instead of personally doing so, he is spreading it through you. My dear sir, you are chanting the holy name 300,000 times daily and informing everyone of the importance of such chanting. Some behave very well, but do not preach. But do not preach the cult of Krishna consciousness, whereas others preach but do not behave properly. You simultaneously perform both duties in relation to the holy name by your personal behavior and by your preaching. Therefore, you are the spiritual master of the entire world, for you are the most advanced devotee in the world. So we could say that, Aindra Prabhu would be right on the top of the list of devotees in ISKCON who have glorified the holy name and who have spread within our society and also in the world the importance of the chanting of the holy name. And although he wasn't chanting 300,000 times a day, which basically takes up the whole day, right? It's how many rounds is that? That's 192 rounds, right? But Aindra Prabhu was chanting 64 rounds every day, and through his example and through his singing, so many devotees understood and gained an understanding of the importance of the holy name. One of my favorite. I don't know if the way Aindra Prabhu began in Vrindavan in 1986. He moved there then. And he started on Ram Vijay Dasami, which is in Kartik, I believe, right? He started on that day, the day of Lord Ramachandra's conquering. He started the 24-hour kirtan, which has gone on ever since then. So 86, 96, 106, for the last 24 years. That has been going on continuously, the 24-hour kirtan. And and he wasn't always, the famous Aindra Prabhu that we all know. When I visited Vrindavan the first time, I actually kind of stayed in Vrindavan for the first time in 1987 and then moved there permanently. I moved there for the last 20 years in 89. And in those days, I didn't really even know who he was so much. He was kind of quietly doing his bhajan. I mean, I knew who he was, but he was nobody. He was just another one of the Prabhus, and there had been no cassettes or tapes distributed in the beginning, and he was just quietly going about his service. And I remember when he started producing cassettes, there was one title that really captured my attention. It said, the name of the cassette was, Kirtan is our bhajan. It was a very bold statement, Kirtan is our bhajan. And that was quite a statement. And as a matter of fact, I remember one sannyasi telling me once that he said, in a very appreciative way, that he said, Aindra Prabhu has probably kept more people in ISKCON than anyone else. And he said that because, as we all know, or most of us know, there was a time, especially in the starting in the early 90s and even somewhat up till today, where devotees started, taking interest in Raganuga Bhakti and where is Radharani, and, trying to understand, the deeper import of Braja Leela. And there was a time when people said, no, you have to go outside of ISKCON to this sannyasi or that person to gain that understanding. Yet Aindra Prabhu provided that kind of kata and that kind of interest within ISKCON. And many devotees were satisfied with talking to him about such topics and didn't feel the need to wander beyond Srila Prabhupada's institution for that purpose. So he had such a multifarious impact. So I guess I'll just go through that little history. So these cassettes would come out. One of them, then he came out part 1 and part 2 of Braja. Does anyone remember? Braja Dham, was it? Or Vrindavan Mellows, right, Vrindavan Mellows. I think there were 3 parts to it. Yeah, 3 parts to it. And during the festivals, some devotees would volunteer to set up a table and sell those. And then somehow some devotees started making orders for their gift shops. And, it just kind of started in a very organic, simple way. So I just wanted to make the point that it didn't, he didn't kind of just hit the scene running when he first came to Vrindavan. He was just kind of quietly, had no room and a couple of devotees, and they were just slowly building up this program to where it is today, where I don't know how many hours a day we play Aindra Prabhu's bhajans here in the temple when the devotees are singing, and you go all around the world and you hear devotees playing his recordings. Previous to coming to Vrindavan, he did a very interesting program, which I kind of wonder if it would be a great thing for us to introduce in a lot of other cities. But he, with Rambhadra Prabhu, he bought a flatbed truck, right? A truck with a flatbed on it, and they set up a bhajan with loudspeakers, and they would just drive up and down the busy streets of New York City. I think they got in trouble sometimes because of safety things, because it's a flatbed truck. I'm sure they didn't have their seatbelts on, they're just, because it was just a flatbed truck and a mridanga player and maybe harmonium. I don't remember if it was harmonium and kartals. And sometimes what they would do is they would park, if in New York there's some really busy intersections. So sometimes they'd park on the right side, and just keep on playing there until the police move them on. So even prior to coming to Vrindavan, he was very, very attached to spreading the glories of the holy name. And his over the last few years, we've seen, like I said, it kind of like, his impact on ISKCON kind of was like this, and then the past few years has kind of been like that. For example, a devotee who works with him, I think probably some of you know, his name is Gopal Prabhu. He has 2, a brother and a sister who are devotees, and his father is, anyone help me? He wrote the book about Srila Prabhupada in South Africa. Can't remember his name all of a sudden. Anyway, Gopal Prabhu talked to Malati Mataji, and at that time Radhanath Swami was a GVC in New Vrindavan, and they agreed to have this 24-hour kirtan in New Vrindavan, which now I guess has been happening, maybe 4 years in a row, 3 years, right? And has become like, a real big thing. And then not only that, but we see all over, practically all over the world. In Europe, they have these sometimes 12-hour, 24-hour kirtans, and many places. So it's something that I believe began with from the inspiration from Aindra Prabhu. So that's a huge impact on on ISKCON and on the devotees. In terms of the, how many of you have been personally in a kirtan with Aindra Prabhu in Vrindavan? it also comes out in his recordings, very intense, right? It's not just, it's like, it's really, really quite an intense experience, and it often builds up to just before the 7 o'clock or arti, right? Because usually he would go from 6 till 7, or later when his throat wasn't going so well, 6:30 to 7, and so just building up to when the pujaris blow the conch shell and they begin the Gaur arti, Sandhya arti. And it builds up to a crescendo, and he's kind of like the conductor. He's just conducting this whole orchestra, and also in Vrindavan there's just crowds and crowds of people who come, and they would become so attractive, and then almost always there would be some person, some visiting person who would just spontaneously stand up and dance, and sometimes whole groups would dance, and it was a whole experience. And Aindra Prabhu was very choosy, very much like B.B. Govinda Maharaj, also very choosy about who played what instruments. And he didn't mind if you weren't playing properly to grab the kartals right out of your hand and give them. He really wanted to make sure that things were going well, and he personally made trained the mridanga players and made sure the kartals. It was really it was a whole performance. Sometimes it reminded me when he was walking into the temple room of. I don't want to get mundane, but before I was a devotee going to concerts, and there would be the warm-up band, but then and he had a warm-up band also. Some devotees were doing bhajans before he came, so there's a warm-up band, but then whatever, Mick Jagger walks on the stage and everyone goes crazy, or whatever. So it was a little bit like that. He would walk into the temple and everyone would be, and then he'd sit down. And he would never allow anything except the Mahamantra. Bas. Only on Radhastami, he would chant, songs glorifying Srimati Radharani. But I think, I don't remember anything any other day, maybe someone else does. I don't remember any other day where there would be any other mantra. If somebody was part of the 24-hour kirtan and they started, Sitaram or, any, slap. No, Hare Krishna mantra. Only the Hare Krishna mantra. So he was fixed on that, because Srila Prabhupada said that in kirtan we only need 3 mantras, the Panchatattva Mahamantra, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and we can sing Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Madhava Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudam. Bas. That was it. And as we know, even on Ram Navami in Vrindavan, at least, when a devotee started singing Raghupati Rag, Prabhupada sent Hari Sari Prabhu down and said, tell him to stop, just chant Hare Krishna. So Aindra Prabhu was very much following in that mood. Besides being such he was an artist, right? He was an artist. We know, you hear his recordings, and they are one of a transcendentally professional artist. He was, like I was saying, he was very picky about how things were done, and he had a flair. And that came out not only in his singing, but how many of you have been up to his room in the past, maybe 4 or 5 years? Yeah, Davey? Yeah, when he decorated everything with cow dung. Yes, it was incredible, right? He had different pastimes of the Lord and different decorations, all kind of like reliefs, all done in cow dung, and different motifs, and all, and then the photos. The walking up to his, because there was a separate entrance in the Gurukul building, for child protection reasons and others, to get to his place. And so that whole walk up to his room was in itself a transcendental experience. Right? Davey, what else? There was photos of the deities, and what else? Do you remember?
Yeah, first of all,
one second. Give the mic so that...
He was, as you say, he was really particular. So when they were doing this cow dung thing, he really researched how to do it perfectly. And they experimented, because we asked them at the Gurukul side, because we wanted to imitate. The greatest compliment you can give to somebody is imitate. And they, experimented in the different, it's cow dung mixed with mud, and then they used Fevico, which is this glue, to keep it on the wall longer. And then, before they put it up, they had waterproofed all the walls. And then he designed everything around each door. There were designs, and around each frame, and the different paintings. And then there was, cows put in, and peacocks. And he had these ladies, and he would personally supervise everything. And then afterwards, it was all varnished on top of that. And so there was darker shades on lighter shades, and it was really a work of art, like living art. And he loved it, and everybody loved it.
Right, good. Keep the mic, because I'll probably ask you to add some things. Do you want to talk about management, or you want me to, or our interactions with him? I'll start. Yeah. Because I kind of witnessed it more, but Mataji and Aindra Prabhu, had some number of interactions, because she was the principal of the Gurukul, and therefore kind of in charge of the Gurukul building. And Aindra Prabhu and the 24-hour kirtan were taking up some of the rooms in the building. So there was some, naturally had to be some communications and some give and take about things like paying rent. That's, by the way, that point, that's another kind of like this kind of thing, because in the beginning he had no money for the 24-hour kirtan, barely enough to maintain, give the devotees some kitchery, and maybe buy them a toothbrush every now and then. But they were just living literally hand to mouth. And I think, not to say anything disparaging, but at certain times the temple management may not have fully appreciated the importance of the 24-hour kirtan, and kind of thought of it as a separate program, and so there wasn't a lot of money flowing from the temple to him either. And that also he just built up, simply beginning with a few cassette sales, and then devotees taking, oh, you're going to the West, can you carry some cassettes with you, and maybe sell a few, but then as time went on, and he became more well known, and devotees were giving donations, and he was even, I think, towards that time paying rent to the Gurukul just out of the coffers from the 24-hour kirtan, right? Rather than from the temple side. So even Krishna blessed him with Lakshmi, but not right away. In other words, it's really important to appreciate the struggle that he went through, especially in those early years. Right, because there was often, because he was there all year long. We never stayed in Vrindavan in the summer. We always came to the West, and it was, for Western-bodied devotees, it was almost inevitable that they would get sick because of the combination of first the dry heat in the summer, which would get even hotter than we have here, maybe 10 degrees hotter than we've had the last few days here, and then the monsoons with the very humid heat. And that 1-2 punch knocked out most Western devotees. And we would always, even to this day, we told devotees, who are from the West, don't stay in the summer, come back at least when the rains come, because that 1-2 combination. But he was there, 365 days. And in the summer, when the Gurukul wasn't open, often the generator wouldn't be turned on. So that means, in the 80s, probably lots of, many days in the summer when there was just no electricity and it's 120 degrees. that means no fans.
On the third floor.
And they're on the, thank you. And they're on the third floor, which is arguably 10 to 20 degrees hotter than the ground floor. Easily, right? I mean, it's so much hotter. So much hotter. So, no money. And then, again, being respectful, but especially in the beginning, the kind of devotees that joined him were, okay, well, you can't do anything else. You can't do Sankirtan, you can't do any deity worship, you can't wash the pots. Okay, we'll go to Vrindavan and join the kirtan. You're crazy. Seriously, he got some, really, really wild people over the years. And he just dealt with whoever he dealt with. When the temple would kick somebody out, he would take them on because he needed people to chant. He was committed to this 24-hour kirtan. And again, like so many things in later years, he got so many, very, very wonderful, like I mentioned Gopal Prabhu and Bhagavat Purana Prabhu, Ram Roy Prabhu would come often, and many devotees would visit for, a few months and live with him, and he got the caliber of devotees that he worked with, changed over the years. But again, in the beginning, it wasn't like that at all. So he performed incredible austerities to get the 24-hour kirtan going. So there was a time when Mataji was hoping to move the Aindra Prabhu and the devotees who were taking up those 6 or 8 rooms to another facility a little further away, and she really wanted to make sure that it was a nice place and that they would be comfortable, but that the school could get those rooms in order to accommodate more children who were attending the Gurukul. And this, to say the least, this was not to Aindra Prabhu's liking. But the important thing here is why. Why was it not to his liking? It was because he from his room, he could hear the kirtan. The noise rises. And he wanted to make sure that the kirtan never stopped. So even though there was an offer, I don't know if you know where the Prabhupada Vani ashram is. It's kind of on the way to the Goshala, and there was promises to make it first class, air conditioning, this, that, very, very nice, much more comfortable than where he was on the 3rd floor of a building filled with 150 or 200 children that make a lot of noise. But he wanted to stay there because he wanted to make sure that the kirtan never stopped. And he was so, because of child protection rules, we had to make sure that there was a separate entrance, and no one in the the children couldn't go to that area, and people who worked in the 24-hour kirtan couldn't go to where the children were taking rest. So I can remember one time when you were talking to him and trying to figure out, well, how can this be done? And he was willing to do all kinds of pretty creative and, as we would say, far out ways in order to make sure he could stay there. One thing was to build this little spiral staircase coming from the back of the building that would kind of crawl its way up to the 3rd floor of the building. And so or another one was to put a hole in the ceiling. Remember that one? And there would be like a little ladder, and they'd go up through the ceiling and then across the roof to a entrance, and that way they wouldn't, be connected to where the children was. So something else was worked out eventually, but he was willing to go to some real extremes in order to make sure that he was there, hearing the kirtan, making sure it was going on. At the end, he would always do a Chaturmasya Brat. So you would see, if you In Chaturmasya, you grow your beard. Well, you do a whole bunch of things, right? But externally, you would know it's Chaturmasya because he had a beard. And at the end of 2 months, it's a 4-month period. So at the end of the first 2 months, you shave, and then at the end, and there's a big feast. At the end of Kartik, when the 4-month brat was done, and that was also the end of his Bhisma Panchaka brat, which was, pretty austere. He wasn't able to do it physically every year, but a number of years, where one day you eat, only drink cow urine, another day cow dung, another day milk, yogurt, and something else. 5 days. And then, so anyway, my point was then he would have this feast for as many devotees as wanted to come, I believe. Maybe it was by invitation, but many, many devotees, and he would always talk to Mataji and ask her if it was okay on that day to use the Gurukul verandas for serving the prasadam. And he would orchestrate the cooking, and especially in those latter years where some funds were available, he covered the expense of the feast, which wasn't a small amount of money. And he would feed the devotees, make sure that they were, personally sometimes go around, make sure that they were well fed. Why don't you talk about graduation last year?
We've lived for years in the same building, and the students always knew Aindra Prabhu and had great affection for him, but they were a little bit afraid of him as well because, we were kind of on the, the mundane level, and they were up on the highest level, and just focusing on the names where we had focused on many things. In fact, one time Aindra Prabhu said to me, because the boys would play in the garden in the middle of the school, and they'd play this game called kabaddi, which is a kind of a catch game. And as you're trying to catch the person, you have to say kabaddi, 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 like that. So Aindra Prabhu said, I don't mind they play the game, but please have them say Radhe, Radhe, Radhe when they're running around trying to catch each other instead of this kabaddi. So he was always looking down upon us and giving us some nice guidance. But last year, for the graduation program, the 12th graders really wanted Aindra Prabhu to come and do kirtan in the school with them as one of their last gatherings. So we said, well, you go ask him. And they did, and he came. And he came down, and we had all the students in the garden, and when he came in, they all stood up, and they just naturally or spontaneously started, clapping and welcoming him. And he was very touched, I think, because this was the first time he had actually, he'd come before to do a program with the teachers, but this was the first time that he'd actually come into the school. We would always go to the temple and chant with him. And he had a wonderful kirtan, of course. The boys, especially the older students, all played mridanga with him, and he just did how he does so wonderfully, getting everybody involved. And then in the end, he asked me, would I mind if he said a few words? So I said, no, of course not. And so he started talking to the students, and he said, basically he repeated that, no matter, basically throw out everything you've learned, because really, you've learned the most important thing. You've learned the one thing that you have to learn in life, that everybody has to learn in life, you have it. So you don't need anything else. And of course that was the holy name of Krishna and chanting the holy name. And it was just such a wonderful, it was in the evening time, chanting in Vrindavan under the stars with Aindra Prabhu in the garden. I was there and I thought, it can't get much better than this. So he was very kind, and he had promised he would come and do that again with more of us. Another time, we used to, twice a week the boys would have, just in the last year we started this, or a couple of years back, they would have this tandoori roti for supper. And to do that you had to make a fire, because they would make them in this big drum that had cow dung on the inside, and so you had to fire it up. And when they would make the fire, all the smoke, the kitchens were down from where Aindra Prabhu's rooms were, so all the smoke would go up And he and his party didn't like that at all. It would just last for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then it would go away. And one time, one of his brahmacharis was calling down from upstairs, saying, "You're just all interested in satisfying your tongues down there. You're just all sense gratifiers." And I was calling up saying, "I got to do it for the kids. I got to do it for the kids." So everybody was always kind of defending their area of service. But one of the teachers went to talk to Aindra Prabhu about it, and so Aindra Prabhu just said, "Well, at least you can send us up some rotis so I can offer them to my Thakurji." So we began to do that. So he was wonderful like that. Speaking about the devotees who served with him, one time, about 4 or 5 years back, there was somebody in our primary student's bathroom cleaning the bathroom, and so I went there right away because we were really strict about who was in the building. And I said, "Who are you? Where are you from?" He said, "I'm part of Aindra Prabhu's kirtan party." And this one of the services they had to do as being part of his party was to clean the bathrooms. That was just a requirement of living there. Of course, it didn't include the Gurukula bathrooms, but he got enthusiastic. But I appreciated that sense of menial service, and that's the qualification. That was part of the training that Aindra Prabhu had for them to do that. Anything on your list about the Gurukula?
No.
Just that he would dress Radha Shyam Sundar regularly. In fact, I don't know how many times a week, but when he would dress the deities, he'd always stand in front of Radha Shyam during Guru Puja time, and sometimes he would discuss with the devotees, and they'd be looking at how they were dressed. And Aindra Prabhu didn't. He didn't have any ladies involved in the 24-hour kirtan, which sometimes devotees felt. Prabhupada did and felt that wasn't fair. But he was very strict he was very encouraging for the ladies, but he was very strict about that. So we weren't ever allowed to go upstairs to his room or on that side of the Gurukula building. So I didn't get personal association much, but one time, during Bhagavatam class, the kirtan would stop, but he would have the kirtan people had to chant japa while the Bhagavatam class was going on. And they would do it in the mandap to the right of Radha Shyam Sundar. There's this little mandap, because that's where the original 24-hour kirtan was started. So when we would sit at class, sometimes we'd hear these devotees chanting japa during class, and I got a bit annoyed with that one day. So I asked them about it, and they said, "Well, go talk to Aindra Prabhu, because he told us we had to do this." So I did. I met Aindra Prabhu afterwards, and I asked him about it, and he explained how that at Radhakund, that's what they do. They just keep the name going all the time. He said they're supposed to. Yeah, at Raghunath Das Goswami Samadhi at Radhakund, when they do which I assume or expect was an inspiration for his 24 kirtan. Actually, he would go out there on those days and chant at that Samadhi on the appearance and disappearance days of Raghunath Das Goswami. So he said how they were actually meant to chant very quietly. It's supposed to be a whisper. And he said he would talk to them about that. And I asked him, but then he smiled and he said to me, "But you can chant," he said, "you can chant the holy name and listen at the same time to Bhagavatam class." He said, "I can do that." So I appreciated he took the time to speak to me.
Just in general, the way he interacted with you, definitely the way.
Yeah, he was always very gentlemanly. Sometimes, on occasion, he would come into the school if he was very anxious about something with regard to electricity or... and just to get back to the third floor was really, really hot, and it was just last year that they put in ACs up there for he and all the people who live there, and he did get very sick over the years staying there, really, really sick, because it's extremely, it's just so extremely intense and hot in that building. But on occasion he would come in, flying in with his curtains flying, and he would burst through the office door and, you know, proclaim that, you know, I needed to do something for him or this or that, but always very respectful, always just, you know, not mean or demanding, but just intensely enthusiastic and requesting me to, you know, take care of whatever issue needed to be taken care of. So I always found him very, very, yeah, just a gentleman, actually, in his dealings with me. Yeah.
Yeah, when you mentioned about Bhagavatam, anyway, I remember he would, for a number of years, maybe 5 or 6, 7 years, he would be listening up in his room to the Bhagavatam class. And so if you're there giving the class, and then you see him towards the end of the class walking in, you know, uh-oh. Because often he would, well, he would kind of sometimes, you had to, of course, call on him if he has your hand, if he has his hand up. He can't, like, you know, although I would, like, try to leave it to the end and see anyone else, you know, and kind of like make believe I didn't see him for a little while. Because he'd either ask a very difficult question, but more often he would give his own Bhagavatam class after that, you know, kind of pick up on something that he wanted to say. And a matter of fact, one time he gave like a 4-hour Bhagavatam class. I think after that, management didn't let him give another class for some time. Went on until like the noon arti or something like that. But I remember I was, my only hope was, I didn't mind, you know, him going on. My only hope was that he wasn't going to, you know, correct something, you know, that I said, you know, in the class or something like that. Because you'd see him coming in because you know he's listening, and it wasn't always, but when he did decide to come down, it was like, okay. I think I had, in terms of his health, I remember one time he had, I think it was his eye, he had a really bad infection in his eye. I think it was his eye. And it wasn't going away for a long time, it looked really bad. So I went up to him, I said, look, Prabhu, you know, why don't we just go to, I'll take you to Apollo Hospital, which was, at that time, there was one really good hospital in Delhi. Now there's a number, but that was, you know, it's almost a Western quality hospital. As a matter of fact, a lot of Westerners fly from America there to get operated on because, you know, they have this medical tourism. So I said, you know, it won't cost you anything, just, you know. He refused. He said, I'm not leaving Vrindavan. And the other thing that I remember in terms of his health was, of course, it was an ongoing thing that he would lose his voice. Right? Because again, if we've all heard his recordings, it wasn't just Hare Krishna, it was intense chanting, and that really does something to your vocal cords. So one thing that helped him was, I forget the full name, but maybe you know, you see them in drugstores, these fishermen, what are they called? Yeah, Fisherman's Friends, yeah. I think there's different ones, and he liked the darker color package. You know, so we would try to stock up on those when we visited in the summer, and bring them. And those he would be kind of popping in his mouth as he was singing. On his harmonium, I think it was a Panchatattva. He had a little picture about this big on his harmonium, and I believe it was a Panchatattva that he would sing to as he was chanting. So let me just look real quickly at my notes here. Those were the main thing. Oh, well, one thing is, he wasn't an easy person to imitate. He really is a unique person in the true sense of the word unique. And there was many attempts to try to get him to conform. At one time, we went through a lot of temple presidents in Vrindavan. I think Devi Shakti Mataji counts 26 when she joined there in 76. So I remember one time there was there was co-presidents who came from for lack of a better word, a conservative ISKCON mindset. So they didn't appreciate Aindra Prabhu's dress. I think most of us know how he would dress. He would dress like Babaji. It was one piece of cloth that I never figured out how to wear it actually, but it would kind of, anyway, somehow or other it would cover his bottom and top. I don't know how he did it, but it would, one piece of cloth. So they tried to force him to wear a saffron dhoti, because he was a brahmachari, so he should wear a saffron dhoti. That didn't go over very big. But similarly, over the years, there would sometimes be a devotee who would join his group and try to, either sing like him, or dress like him, or perform austerities like him, and it just wasn't the same. Right? It wasn't the, of course it was in all sincerity and things, but you just, there's certain people that, he just obviously had such powerful purva samskars, impressions from previous births that most of us didn't have. And so for those who tried to imitate, it was, I don't mean to say we made fun, but it was almost a little comical because you could just see the difference. Aindra, looked like a sadhu, and sometimes these otherwise kind of look like, Barney Rubble or something like that, they try to dress. And I don't mean to, criticize Vaishnavas, but my point is not to make fun of them, but my point is that, there's certain people you just can't imitate. Right, that we say about Krishna, right? That we or even the spiritual master, right? You follow in their footsteps. You don't try to imitate them. So he wasn't a person to be imitated. He was, certain things, of course, his attachment to the holy name, and even for those of us who can, his chanting of 64 rounds and things like that. But the level of his austerity, the intensity of his, he was a very, very intense person, especially when you started talking to him about a topic that he was passionate about. Then it was incredibly intense, right? Incredibly intense.
Yeah, and last year for I think it was the Disappearance Festival of Prabhupada, he's always very intense and very has strong feelings, and his offering was about how really one should concentrate on the holy name and forget everything else, and so a little bit down on management, but his point was good, but he expressed it in quite a dramatic, one could say artistic, and in a way that actually some senior devotees there felt very hurt and offended by his offering, that their service may not be, it appeared that he wasn't he was putting down their services and just pushing up the chanting. So there was a bit of a stir in Vrindavan at that time, but then the next morning after Mangalarti, Aindra Prabhu, in front of a huge temple room full of people, he actually got up and made an apology and said that, and clarified what he was trying to say. But, I just appreciated so much just the ability for, someone of that stature and of that caliber and of that advancement to come in front of all the Vaishnavas and humbly apologize for hurting the other devotees, and that wasn't his intention. So, his intensity sometimes got the better of him, and then he had to pull it back a little bit.
Right, he didn't steer away from controversy sometimes, but it was clear that whatever he was doing, the intention was Krishna conscious. Sometimes the impact, like you said, there was a couple of incidences over the years, but it was. Although sometimes things had to be clarified, I won't go into any details, but the point is that his intention was always in the right place. And I think that's a very, very important thing to remember for all of us. We may also sometimes get carried away, or we may do some stupid thing, but generally devotees in the service that I deal with these things, and you see that generally the 98% of the time the devotees' intentions are good. Sometimes their impact doesn't match their intention, and that can be a problem. But they don't mean harm or mean to do harm or hurt other people. So he was a very intense person. Finally, that temple management just made him the one exception. No one else on your party can dress like you. No one else. You only. Bus. Finished. And so they made that caveat. So that's what I had. But other devotees who would like to say something? Michael, would you like to sit here, bro? Microphone will come in a second, bro.
Lord Chaitanya's most important instruction, well, at least we can say there are many instructions that Lord Chaitanya gave were very, very important, but one of them that really stands out is Amara, where he said that Amara Agya Guru Hana Tarai Desh, Jaritaki Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh. Aindra Prabhu exemplified that. He was truly a spiritual master. He really influenced a lot of people in their Krishna consciousness, like you were saying. And like any spiritual master cannot be imitated, People can say, well, after the spiritual master leaves, the disciples become spiritual masters, and they may try to behave like their spiritual master, but it always ends in failure. You have to be yourself, but you learn the principles from the person. And with Aindra Prabhu, at our temple we have his kirtans going on all the time. One of the sets of kirtan that happens is his set of kirtans. And people again and again will ask for copies of that kirtan because they hear it and they really appreciate it. But of late, when I went to Vrindavan, like I went the last trip I went, it was about 3 months ago, I was doing japa, walking around the temple, just doing japa, doing parikrama, like many devotees do. And there's no doubt about it that he was the apple of everyone's eye. Like, he was such a famous devotee that wherever he went, people congregated around him, And I noticed while I was doing kirtan, I wanted to speak to him, but I noticed there's so many people who want to speak to him. And when he's outside the temple, just where we wash our feet as we come out of the temple on the side that Radha Shyam Sundara, we go towards the Goshala. So there's a meeting that had happened of the Indian RGB, all the leaders of India had come to New Delhi to have a meeting, and then they all came to Vrindavan. And so some of them were talking to him, they were just congregating around talking to him, casually with other devotees. One thing I noticed about him was that he hardly spoke. He just listened, And I could tell it was pure humility, because there were times when I'd stand there and I knew that he could say something, but before he would say something, somebody else would want to say something. Because the nature of, devotees generally is that, we like to talk, not hear. We like to talk. But in his case, he really liked to hear. I could see that even though he could have interjected and said something, he didn't. He just kept quiet, let everybody kept talking. There was one particular devotee, one of the Indian leaders, who really sort of wanted to talk, And he repeated himself so many times, the same thing. And I thought, why don't you let him speak? You're asking him questions, and then you're answering your own question, I mean, what type of a question is that? When you ask a question and you answer it yourself. I mean, that means you're trying to tell somebody you know something, And he wasn't like that at all. He was really very, very humble, a very humble person. No matter how, sort of famous he became, he kept his humility. And that's a very difficult thing to do in those circumstances. So he was really, what I wanted to say was, he's really truly a spiritual master. And when I heard that he had left, I heard from Anjali, first person I heard from, that he had left his body. she had called from India to let me know that that had happened. And the first thing that occurred in my mind was that, we should dedicate all our programs today and tomorrow like that to him. Because, imagine an important spiritual master leaving his body. People do things that go beyond the normal, in terms of remembering devotees who are very important, who have left their body. This is a very special devotee who has left his body, And so I just wanted to say that today and tomorrow, all our programs are dedicated to him. We'll be doing kirtan all the way tomorrow till Mangalarti in one shape, form, or another, including today we're thinking of going out on a Harinam, because Harinams are such an important part of expressing kirtan. And tomorrow also, and we have the youth coming in. Unfortunately, their bus broke down, and so they're delayed. But they'll be here sooner or later. We're making arrangements for other ways to get them here if the bus can't bring them. And so, they'll be here, and they'll be really enthusiastic, but they love kirtan as well. So I just wanted to say to everybody, this is our great opportunity to take blessings from this personality by participating in what he wanted to teach us. And that was, the most important thing was the holy name of the Lord. In any and every way that we could actually identify with the holy name of the Lord, associate with the holy name of the Lord, particularly spread the holy name of the Lord, that we should make every effort in whatever we do to connect like that in whatever we do. And I was very happy to hear from Madhananda Vrindavaneshwari how, when in his talk that he gave to the students, that he actually highlighted that point, That was his life. And we definitely can learn that from it and become much better devotees as a result of learning that. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
You reminded me of something you said, reminded me of one other super important service that Aindra Prabhu would do. And that is that he would always chant to devotees who were leaving their body. And of course, a lot of devotees leave their body in Vrindavan. Who has a samadhi there? Yeah, I'm just going blank. But anyway, you'll remember his name in 10 seconds, I hope. Great. So many devotees. This was his standard service. And as a matter of fact, where we live, Prananda Mataji's house is just opposite, and the top floor was often used as a hospice for devotees at that time, because the new hospice actually is going to be inaugurated quite soon, I think in the next couple of months, a big facility for devotees leaving their body. So we would often be hearing, the bhajans. I remember conversations with my wife and saying, gosh, there couldn't be anything better than to leave your body in Vrindavan with Aindra Prabhu singing, and Vibhu Chaitanya Prabhu, who's another person we could spend the next 24 hours glorifying, and he has a samadhi there in the Goshala, and so he was there. And then when our Dhiren Sen, Dadu, famous devotee who delivered the mail when he was leaving this world, he would have kirtan for him. You were going to say? But often one second, I might as well get the mic, right? Yeah.
There was quite a few occasions where Aindra Prabhu just showed up right at the right time. They didn't know the person was going to leave, because you never quite know. But on a few occasions, people were amazed that, he was just so tuned in, and then he would just show up and be there when the person left.
Yes, and he was willing to just...
This young girl who was that accident in Vrindavan where she got shot, and she was in a coma, and there was kirtan going on, and they expected her to be in a coma for quite a few days, and then, Aindra Prabhu arrived, and within an hour she left. Those kind of things would happen with Aindra Prabhu, very extraordinarily wonderful mysteries of that
I
energy.
remember with Vibhu Chaitanya Prabhu, he was just basically, look, I'm here until he leaves. I'm just going to stay here. I mean, often when persons were deathly sick, but it wasn't clear, he would have a schedule, 2 hours in the evening or something like that. But it was a very, very important service that he rendered, and I know devotees who were leaving their bodies felt a great amount of solace. Knowing that he was there and chanting, and he would often start off, I mean, I was only not at so many, but he would start off in a very kind of solemn way, but sometimes he would really get the room rocking. Because he was very fixed in understanding dehi nushminyata dehe komaram yovaram jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra numid. He would just be like in bliss when someone left, because he knows they were hearing the holy name, they left this world, and he would just he wasn't lamenting for the passing away of the body. He was really yes, very. Something you said sparked me in my memory about that. Other devotees? Pardon me?
In those last moments when he left, what was that pastime? Were the devotees then around his bed chanting?
This yesterday?
Yes.
The reports that we're getting is that when the accident happened with the cylinder, that somehow or other he made his way to his deities and paid obeisances to his deities. No, it was an accident. Oh, I don't know if you know, right? In India you cook with gas cylinders, and there's at least 2 main sizes, a very big one, and then a smaller one, which is about 5 kgs. And it was a small one. Actually, one of the managers in the temple mentioned that if it had been one of the bigger ones, it probably would have blown off the roof of the Gurukul. So somehow or other, this cylinder exploded, and the reports that we've gotten is that that he somehow made his way to the deities and paid obeisances, and was found in that position, paying obeisances to his deities. And that he had previously requested that his body be cremated at the Yamuna, and that some of the ashes be sprinkled near by his deities. He had lots of deities, right? I mean, does anyone know how many shalagrams? Yeah, I mean, like serious amount of shalagrams, yes. And other Gornitai, I know he had, yeah. I think, yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I just wanted to relate a couple small remembrances. When I joined the temple in Chicago, the first year there in 1979, he was also a devotee living there, and brahmachari. And just some remembrances. I remember sometimes seeing him. We had a really old YMCA building. Sometimes he'd be sleeping in the stairwell with a gumsha on. And, this is to show how austere. I mean, he was like this even back then where, just with a gumsha and maybe a cheddar wrapped over him, his head draping down a step. That's where he'd sleep sometimes. I was coming back from doing Sankirtan downtown Chicago on the subway train, and he happened to come through the car that I was in, and he was doing the pick on the subway train, going up to people with a little piece of paper that said, "I'm deaf and dumb, please make a donation to help me." And so he was always performing austerities even back then, and then more recently, in 2003, I had my first visit to Vrindavan Dham, and I was in the computer room, and he came in, and so we started to talk about some of our being together back in Chicago, And then he spoke about how he was having difficulties with his throat, and the doctors told him he may have to limit his singing to a very minimal amount, and otherwise he may, lose his voice completely. And as he was telling me that, tears started to roll down his face, and he was lamenting just the idea that he would have to do that. And he said, if that happens, he says, I'll be forced to just take shelter of my japa. Some way he was talking like that. And then I also had the good fortune of somebody mentioning about those fisherman lozenges. So when I went there this last year, I went to his room to offer him that as a small gift, and I could tell he was very busy. It was right before he was supposed to go down for the kirtan, and he invited me to go to the kirtan. And prior to that, in Mayapur, he was there right before Gaur Purnim. And I remember one night, I was walking over towards the Samadhis. It was about 10:30, and I could hear this. I started hearing this kirtan. I said, well, I think I was only there for maybe one day at that time. I said, I want to go and see what's going on. But I knew I was going to be getting up very early, and I didn't want to spend too much time over there. I mean, it's hard to say, how do you not want to spend time in the kirtan? But I knew I also wanted to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning or somewhere in that area. And so I went over to the temple room, and there was this huge kirtan going on. And Madhava I think his name is Aindra Prabhu, was leading the kirtan, and Aindra was sitting right next to him. And I stood there and I was watching them, and it was as if beams of ecstasy were coming off of Aindra, and the whole temple room was just these waves of going up and down and up and down. I was stunned. I stood there in one spot for 45 minutes. Every now and then I would think, Prabhu, you really should leave. Maybe you should leave. You'll never, what's this going to do to you next morning? But I couldn't leave. I was just totally stunned by that kirtan and his presence there. And finally the kirtan ended in 45 minutes, and I've kind of escaped from there, knowing that I would never leave if I stayed there and it started up again. And seems like there was one other thing. After that one kirtan, he did make a little speech, and I remember his whole speech, his lecture for 10 or 15 minutes was how everything within this movement, everything within our personal lives, all the answers to all the problems will come by performing this kirtan like this. And it is like if our temples just inaugurated these kirtans continually, he was going on and on how that would revitalize everybody's life in Krishna consciousness. Aindra Prabhu Ki Jai.
One thing you said reminded me, because I was sometimes, talk to him or witness how his voice was just shot, totally shot. And I've seen this many times. And then the next day he's leading this intense kirtan, where I would have taken a week off from talking probably and just done silent japa. And I don't know where he got that ability to do that, because it was just, right? I mean, sometimes you talk to him, right, and it was just like there was no voice left. And then that evening you'd see him leading this intense kirtan, sometimes going way high, right at towards the end. His voice, hitting the high up. So I don't know. It was amazing how Krishna gave him that energy. Those are the lozenges, yes. That was your gift.
Aindra Prabhu Ki. I was really, really fortunate to get to meet Aindra Prabhu in Mayapur during it was a seminar for deity worship. And I didn't know he did deity worship. But he was there, and he was dressed in this amazing outfit. It was like a bodysuit almost, but it was like made of this terry cloth. You know the cloth that tennis people have their bandanas are made of? You know that? It was made of that. And it looked really cooling. And his body was golden, and he was a fulgent personality. And he was sitting there in a chair, and Pankajangri and Jananavivas Prabhu were there too. They were the leaders of the seminar on deity worship, but Aindra was the lead speaker. And this was an introduction. This was introductory. This was level 1 of the deity worship. So Aindra Prabhu begins to speak, and I'd heard about him before, and I'd seen him. One time I saw him in a kirtan in Mayapur. I think it was the night before, maybe it was a couple years before. Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu and I walked into the temple room, in the big Panchatattva temple room. And there was a little stage set up to the right of the altar, and he was there doing his bhajan with some devotees. And all of the devotees that walked up to it, it's like Prabhu said, Gopal Prabhu said, everyone was stunned because it was so intense and beautiful and amazing. And we just stood there, and our jaws kind of hit our chin, jaws hit the floor, and we're like, wow. Because it was just beaming out this amazing Krishna melody, and it was deep and intense and spiritual. And we were just going like, wow, I'd never seen anything like it or heard anything like it before. And we've heard it on his tapes. If you get the CDs, it's like that. But when you actually heard him doing it, it was unbelievable. And Panchatattva were there, we were there, and we thought, gosh, it was during Panchatattva's installation when they got installed. And so that was the first time I had ever seen him and just been blown away. And I tried to take a photograph later on when he was doing bhajan, and he looked at me very intensely like, don't take my photograph while I'm doing this. And but I still got the shot, and then I didn't take any others. So later on I was in the deity workshop, the deity worship seminar. And he was speaking, and he began to go really, really deep into a deity worship and what he felt, why he did it, what motivated him. And he was very, he dressed Radhe Shyam, and he said that they were his worshipable deities. I think I'm safe to say that. And he said that he was worshiping them under the direct, or under the shelter. He had taken shelter of Lalita Devi. And Lalita Devi was really his guide. And you could feel it, the intensity of his love for the deities, for deity worship, and that he'd really had a personal relationship with the deities, and that he'd gone so deep that he was really aware of his relationship with Krishna and with Lalita Devi as one of, her helpers. And it was just amazing, to hear him speaking these things. And we were all just blown away. We couldn't believe it. So Pankajangri Prabhu, after a little bit of this, said, Prabhu, wait a minute. This is level 1. You're talking on level 5. And Aindra Prabhu just said, oh, no problem. It's okay to hear this. You should be aware of it, even though you're just starting out. I mean, most of the devotees had done deity worship for a long time, but he said, still, this is good for you to know. This is good. And he didn't miss a beat. He just kept on talking at that level, pretty much. But it was also very practical. The course was practical, how to dress a certain ways and do certain things, and pins and not pinning the deities and flowers. But his speaking on it was so deep, and he spoke about how now all of the deities now are on video, and it goes out all the time. And so he said that he would always be aware of that. He always wanted to dress nicely, but he encouraged us to dress nicely because the whole world was seeing this, and it was for Krishna too. But one thing that he mentioned that he was the first to do was begin to use the little teardrop shaped mukut pieces, the head pieces that go on Srimati Radharani. It's a little teardrop shape. Some devotees call them chandrikas, but they're like parts that go like, you know, part of the little part that's sticking up on Kalachandji's head would go right on Radharani's forehead at her hairline. Have you all seen that before? He said he was one of the first to really ever do that. And then when it went out, devotees would see pictures and it spread. So rightly so, I think he gets credit for that. And he was very close to the deities. He was very close to, felt very strongly about serving Radhe Shyam and Srimati Radharani, especially under Lalita Devi's, tutelage. And there were 4 or 5 days of classes, and I could only go to 3 of them. But just in that short time, he affected me so deeply. I mean, for me, he's one of the top 5 devotees that ever affected me. There's the section in the Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavad Gita, that even a moment's association with a pure devotee can affect you, can change your life. And I feel like it was that way for me, meeting him, because he was so deeply Krishna conscious and friendly. He was super friendly and very open, and he would speak his mind. And you knew that he was telling you everything that you needed to hear. He wasn't holding anything back. There was like no duplicity or defensiveness. Everything we needed to hear about deity worship, in fact, a lot more than we needed to hear, he was telling us. And he wasn't going to hold back anything. And I've only met a couple other devotees that were as friendly as he was, that you knew his heart was totally open to you and he liked you because he could see you beyond just your material covering. He was looking at you as a spirit soul. And Mother Kirtida was like that. She was like that. She treated devotees that way, and that's why everyone loved her. And you could tell everyone loved Aindra because of that. And he was brutally honest. So, someone like that will not always be so popular, but if you can get past, if you can see what he's really trying to say, you have to admit, wow, he's true. It's right. It's true. But his effulgence and the way he carried himself, and I'm just really, really grateful that I got even a tiny amount of time to associate with him, and I learned so much about deity worship from him. And but I wanted to share that because his way of dealing with people that I saw was so Krishna conscious. He was a very Krishna conscious person. And to me, I mean, I know he did bhajans and chanting and 24-hour kirtan, but to me, I always think of him as a deity worship expert. Like, his thing was deity worship. And if you can imagine anyone to dress Radhe Shyam on a regular basis, I mean, they're such beautiful deities. And so for me, I just wanted to share that and encourage devotees to do deity worship. We've got Radha Kalachandji right here, and he's just waiting for our touch. He wants us to touch him. He likes that. And one other quick thing. I don't know if I ever went to his room. I feel like I did. Because if I didn't, then I feel like I've been there spiritually because I've heard it described so nicely. Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu, and I'm sure he's going to speak. And also Namaruchi Prabhu went there. And so hopefully they'll share with us, because it's totally transcendental when you hear what his room was like and his deities. And I heard so many nice things from them about it that went into my heart real deeply too, to feel how he lived with his deities in his room is really amazing. So maybe I can pass the microphone to His Grace Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu. Aindra Prabhu ki!
Shri Shri Radhe Shyam ki jai. Yeah, that was definitely one of the main motivations and highlights to go to Vrindavan, was to be part of his kirtan. I think everybody must have felt that, at least a lot of the devotees. The last time I was there was after Gaur Purnim, when they did the boat festival. And Aindra Prabhu and Bibi Govinda Maharaj and Shiva Maharaj, I don't know if he was there at that time. Dinabandhu was there. Anyway, after the boat festival, they did a stand-up kirtan where Dinabandhu and Bibi Govinda Maharaj and Aindra Prabhu led the kirtan. And that was like a New York-style, fired up, really powerful kirtan. It was really ecstatic. It went for about an hour and a half. And that was really wonderful. So I don't remember if it was that night or it was one of the other nights. Well, one of the nights I went up there was his birthday. I just followed him from his kirtan because I knew him back on Radha Damodar days when we used to go out and distribute books. So I went up to his room and just was there in his room as many devotees were coming and giving him gifts for his birthday. And he was actually giving someone Shalagram Shila, and he described the whole, how to worship the Shalagram, and described the Shalagram worship in a very nice way, and I learned a lot of things just listening to him, because I had never worshipped Shalagram. But that was really wonderful. And then somebody else came in and asked him about chanting, and then he started preaching about the glories of the holy name and the congregational chanting for another hour or so to this devotee. And he was nonstop preaching the whole night, and finally at maybe, I think I went up there at around 8 o'clock or so. I don't remember what time his kirtan finished. What, Braj Bihari, what time was his shift over?
7 o'clock usually at BRT.
Okay. So then sometime after that we walked up to his room. So I was there pretty much the whole night. And it was really wonderful just to hear him preach. He was telling me some things that were kind of interesting to me as a godbrother. I thought was kind of far out. He was saying that some of the devotees didn't want him to give classes because they weren't sure what he was going to say. But when I heard him preaching up there for like 3 hours, all different varieties of subject matters and stuff, I didn't hear anything except Prabhupada's philosophy in a really sweet, realized way. And so that was really wonderful. So finally at around maybe, I don't know, 12:30, everybody left. So it was just he and I there. And then he realized that he hadn't fed his deities and the shalagrams yet. So I said, well, what can I do to help? So he sent me somewhere to get samosas and sweets and different things. So I went and bought a bunch of different things and came and brought them up, and he offered them to his deities, and we sat there and talked for a while longer, till around 1:30 or so. And he gave me a little piece of maha cake. And I took the tulsi leaf off and ate it, and gave the guard the cake, the chowkidar guy there at the gate. But anyway, he was really sweet, and Dharma mentioned his room. Very wonderful. It was made from, all the rooms are brick, covered with concrete in those small rooms. So he customized it by using cow dung and Yamuna sand, I believe, and made some kind of mixture and coated all the walls with it. And then within the coating, there were different designs, like different vines with flowers, and I don't remember all the details. I didn't get to take any pictures of the room. I did take some pictures of the room, but they didn't come out. But when you walk into his room, as soon as you walk in was a lot of his sound equipment, taking up a lot of the space. I don't know how it is now, but this was like in 2006. And then there was a very small little spaces where a few people could sit down, and then there was his table with the shalagrams, and then he had these two beautiful big Gornatais that he rescued from the Padayatra bus. that caught on fire at some point somewhere, and he got the deities, and they were in his room. So this big table, he had 300 or so shellograms, maybe more. I forget how many. And then the big gornitais. And I'm not sure where he slept, actually, because the room is actually pretty small behind gornitai. So there's a little bit of space behind gornitai than some other things. So he didn't have much room in there, but a lot of transcendental activities were going on. But when he walked in, it was very pleasing to see the room, because it was cow dung, and it was all beautiful custom work. So it was like very artistic. So you could see he had a very nice artistic ability. And wow, I can go on and on talking about Aindra Prabhu, but anyway, someone else may want to speak. Aindra Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Aindra Prabhu ki jai. So in, I think it was 2007, my wife and I went to Vrindavan, and I got several opportunities to spend some time up in Ayendra's room. I took pictures also, so if you want to see. And I took a video of that kirtan with Bibi Govinda Maharaj, little clips. There was another one with 2006 that we were there? Okay, 2006. I can't remember everything. But at one point I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go up to visit Aindra Prabhu, and I'll be right back. So I came back 5 hours later. So I was up there, and he read me some passages from his book. It's a book about the holy name, but it was said to be about book distribution. A lot of it was about the chanting of the holy name. He also spoke about this going outside of ISKCON. He expressed some of his realizations that at some point he wanted to not only know what is he not, like we all know that we're not the body, but who is he? Who is he as a spirit soul? Like, what's his relationship? And he had this anxiety, who am I? And he said that he got some realizations from Srila Prabhupada, and that basically Prabhupada will give you everything. There's no, you need to go to this other mat or this sannyasi to get deep realizations of your relationship with Krishna. And one thing you notice is that he was very accommodating. He was always allowing people to come to his room, even though he would only sleep a couple hours or so. He had the time for everybody to welcome into his room and speak, and he would just have, he would go to sleep. I don't know what time he would go to sleep. Sometimes, I think in the middle of the afternoon was the only time he slept, or something like that. But he would always be very gracious and invite everybody, and allow people to come in, and was very patient, just preaching to everybody. I bought 2 of the Screaming Babies from him for Amala Kirtan, and I bought one for myself, but I traded that with Amal. And he only wanted to sell the Screaming Baby harmoniums. He only wanted to sell those if they were going to be used for Harinam. He said, I don't want this. I don't want to be used for your home bhajan or things like that. He wanted them used for Harinam Sankirtan. I remember a few other things. Yeah, I have pictures if anybody wants to see, and I have a nice video clip.
I just wanted to say one other thing, that he was a great inspiration to everybody in the world with his kirtan. So many people, how many people don't listen to his kirtan, let's say? You can hardly find anybody who doesn't listen to Aindra's recordings and his enthusiastic, loving deity worship. So he was actually lived a perfect life of devotional service, which is the goal of our existence, actually, is to take up the process and live in 24 hours of devotional service, become an eternal servant of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. So he was an example of that, always absorbed in his service to the deities and the kirtan and all the devotees. So that was a perfect life. And then when you go to Vrindavan, you go there because you want to die there. You want to become absorbed in devotional service and you want to leave your body there. That's when you go to see all the different older people that retire in Vrindavan, from all the different temples. People are going there so they can become absorbed in Krishna consciousness and so that they can leave their bodies there and go back to Godhead. So these extraordinary people who are so fortunate and so intelligent that they go to Vrindavan for that reason, and he's a success story. Not only just a success story, but an inspiration for the world. Aindra Prabhu ki jai.
One other thing I remembered is that he personally tuned the harmonium. He sat there for hours just tuning the harmonium for me. It was really nice. And like I said, even though he had such, he would worship his deities for, I think, was it 5 hours every day? He had his kirtan program. He barely slept, but he would always be very open and welcome to talk to people and be very, very gracious in that manner.
Grace Aindra Prabhu ki jai. There's a lot to say. Just go with whatever comes to mind. I guess the main thing that comes to mind was I was listening to his lectures a lot when I was in India. I went with the mood of, I'm here in the Holy Dham, and so it was really interesting because when I was going by myself to Vrindavan, and I'd never taken a train in in India. But I'd never taken a train by myself. So one congregation devotee helped me out, and so he said, "Don't worry, Radharani's going to take care of you." So just when I went to the place where I was going to sit, there's a sticker on the wall, and it said something in Hindi or something. And I asked the devotee, "Well, what does it say?" He said, "It says Radhe, Radhe." So, anyways, when I arrived, the first thing as I was going up the stairs, the first person I saw was Aindra Prabhu, and he was coming straight down, and he had this perfect posture, and he just had these deep black eyes that could just look you straight into the soul. And so afterwards, I noticed that he had this project of building the ashram, and so I asked him if I could help him. And when I met him, I introduced myself, and he said, "My name is Aindra Das, and I am in Madhurya Ras. And my service," and he said, "my service is to clean the toilets and chant Hare Krishna." And so from there, he engaged me in different services, and I saw just how he lived. He dressed very simply, even though it was cold at the time. I was there in December. And it was very cold, and he just, wore that one